Varla Dragosh had just finished adding the third item to her list when she realized what she had done. The parchment lay on the rough wooden table in her kitchen, the ink still wet on the words she had scrawled in a moment of pure, unfiltered frustration. The first two entries had been there for months, written in a neater hand during a calmer evening when she had simply meant to catalog the small annoyances of living in a border town where humans and orcs were still learning to share space. Entry 1. Small doors. Entry 2. Weak tea. Both were legitimate grievances, the kind any orc might voice after a day of stooping through human-sized doorframes and choking down beverages that tasted more like hot water with a memory of tea leaves than anything substantial. Entry 3, however, was something else entirely. Watching him talk to other women, Varla stared at the words, her green fingers still gripping the quill, and felt heat rise in her cheeks. She should cross it out. She should burn the whole cursed list. Instead, she set the quill down carefully and pressed her palms flat against the table, trying to steady herself. The problem was that it was true. She did hate it. She hated watching Yoren Nell charm every woman who crossed his path at the market square. She hated the way he leaned in when he spoke, the way his dark eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the way his hands moved through the air as he told some story that made them all laugh. She hated that he was so good at it, so effortless, and she especially hated that she cared. The autumn festival had brought Yoren to Millbrook 3 weeks ago, a traveling musician with a lute slung across his back and a grin that could melt stone. He played in the evenings at the Green Harvest Tavern, filling the air with melodies that made even the surliest farmers tap their feet. During the days, he helped set up the festival stalls, hauling crates and hammering posts, and somehow managing to strike up conversations with half the town in the process. Varla, who ran a small apothecary shop on the edge of the market square, had noticed him immediately, though she told herself it was only because he was new and therefore worth noting. She had not expected him to notice her back, but he had. On his second day in town, he had wandered into her shop with a cut on his hand and a sheepish expression, asking if she had anything for it. She had cleaned and bandaged the wound in silence, acutely aware of how small her workroom was, how close he stood, how his gaze seemed to linger on her face even when she was not looking at him. When she handed him a small tin of healing salve and told him the price, he had paid without haggling and then asked her name. She had answered curtly, expecting him to leave. Instead, he had introduced himself and asked what the best tea in Millbrook was, because the stuff at the tavern was, in his words, an insult to the concept. That had surprised a laugh out of her, a short bark of sound that she immediately tried to smother. He had grinned at her, delighted, and she had found herself telling him that human tea was universally weak, that orcs brewed theirs strong enough to strip paint, and that if he wanted something decent, he should try old Margit's stall by the well. He had thanked her, told her she had a beautiful laugh, and left before she could formulate a response. Since then, he had found reasons to stop by her shop at least once a day. Sometimes he needed more salve. Sometimes he claimed to have a headache and wanted a remedy. Once, he had simply walked in, set a small cloth bag on her counter, and announced that he had bought her proper tea leaves from a traveling merchant, because he figured she deserved to drink something that did not taste like dishwater. Then he had left again, whistling before she could even stammer out a thank you. Varla did not know what to make of him. Men, human men especially, did not usually go out of their way to be kind to her. She was an orc, and while Millbrook was more tolerant than some places, that tolerance had limits. People bought her remedies and salves because they worked, not because they particularly wanted to spend time with her. She had made her peace with that years ago. She kept to herself, tended her garden of medicinal herbs, and built a quiet life that did not invite trouble. Yoren, however, seemed determined to invite himself into that quiet life, and she did not know how to stop him, or if she even wanted to. The real problem had started 2 days ago, when a group of young women from the surrounding farms had come to town for the festival. They were pretty and bright-eyed, and they flocked to Yoren like moths to a flame. He had been setting up the stage in the square when they arrived, and Varla, who had been arranging jars of salve in her shop window, had watched as they surrounded him. He had smiled at them, joked with them, made them giggle and blush. One of them, a blonde girl with a ribbon in her hair, had reached out and touched his arm while she spoke, and Varla had gripped the jar in her hand so tightly that she nearly cracked the glass. It was ridiculous. She barely knew him. She had no claim on him. And yet the sight of him laughing with those girls had kindled something hot and uncomfortable in her chest, something she refused to name but could not ignore. Yesterday had been worse. One of the girls, a redhead with freckles and a bright smile, had lingered after the others left. She had stayed to help Yoren hang banners, and the two of them had worked side by side for over an hour, talking and laughing in a way that looked easy and natural. Varla had told herself to look away, to focus on her work, but her eyes had kept drifting back to them. When Yoren had finally walked the girl back to her wagon, his hand hovering near the small of her back in a way that could have been polite or could have been something more, Varla had retreated into the back room of her shop and spent 10 minutes furiously grinding herbs that did not need grinding. That evening she had started the list. It had seemed like a harmless way to vent her frustration, a private joke to herself about the absurdities of living in a human-dominated town. Small doors, weak tea, both true, both safe. And then, this morning, she had watched through her window as Yoren had stopped to chat with Mara Collin, the blacksmith's daughter, a lovely dark-haired woman who had once asked Varla to make a tincture to help with her complexion. Mara had smiled up at Yoren, and he had smiled back, and Varla had felt that hot, tight feeling in her chest again. Before she knew what she was doing, she had grabbed her quill and added the third entry. Now, sitting alone in her kitchen, staring at the evidence of her own foolishness, Varla wondered if she was losing her mind. She was 26 years old, a grown woman, not some starry-eyed girl who fell apart over a charming smile. She had survived worse than this. She had survived the suspicious looks and muttered slurs when she first moved to Millbrook 5 years ago. She had survived the loneliness of being one of only 3 orcs in a town of 200 humans. She could certainly survive a traveling musician who would be gone the moment the festival ended. She picked up the list, folded it carefully, and tucked it into the pocket of her apron. Out of sight, out of mind. She had work to do. A farmer's wife was coming by this afternoon to pick up a cough remedy for her husband, and Varla still needed to bottle it. She could not afford to waste time brooding over something that did not matter, except it did matter and she knew it, and that was the worst part of all. The afternoon passed quietly. Varla filled bottles, labeled jars, and tried not to think about Yoren. She succeeded for almost an hour before the sound of his lute drifted through her open window, a bright, lilting tune that made her chest ache. He was practicing in the square, no doubt drawing a crowd. She imagined those farm girls clustered around him again, hanging on his every note, and forced herself to focus on measuring out dried chamomile. When the farmer's wife arrived, Varla handed over the remedy with her usual instructions and accepted payment with a polite nod. The woman lingered for a moment, glancing toward the window where the music was still playing, and then looked back at Varla with a curious expression. "He is quite good, is he not?" the woman said. "That musician fellow. My daughter has been talking about him non-stop." Varla kept her face neutral. I suppose he is. She wanted to come to town today just to hear him play, but I told her she had chores. The woman shook her head, amused. Half the girls in the county are moon-eyed over him. I cannot say I blame them. He has a way about him. Yes, Varla said flatly. He does. The woman seemed to realize she had said something awkward because her smile faltered. Well, thank you for the remedy. I am sure it will help. She left quickly, and Varla closed the door behind her, leaning against it and closing her eyes. Half the girls in the county, of course. Why had she ever thought she might be different? Why had she let herself hope, even for a moment, that his kindness toward her meant anything more than the same easy charm he showed everyone else? She spent the rest of the afternoon in her garden, pulling weeds with more force than necessary, and trying to convince herself that she did not care. By the time the sun began to set, she was exhausted and covered in dirt, but at least she was no longer thinking about Yoren. She went inside, washed her face and hands, and started preparing a simple dinner of bread, cheese, and the last of the vegetable stew she had made 2 days ago. She was halfway through her meal when someone knocked on her door. Varla froze, her spoon suspended over the bowl. She was not expecting anyone. She considered ignoring it, but the knock came again, more insistent this time. With a sigh, she set down her spoon and went to the door. Yoren stood on her doorstep, his loot case slung over his shoulder and a lopsided grin on his face. "Good evening," he said cheerfully. "I hope I am not interrupting your dinner." She stared at him. "You are, my apologies." He did not look particularly apologetic. "I will be quick then. I was wondering if you would come to the tavern tonight. I am playing a new song and I would like your opinion on it." Varla blinked. "My opinion?" "Yes, you have good taste, I can tell. You do not know anything about my taste." "Sure I do. You drink proper tea, you keep a tidy shop, and you have not thrown me out yet despite the fact that I keep bothering you. That speaks to excellent judgment." He was still grinning, and she felt an absurd urge to smile back. "I am sure you have plenty of other people who can give you their opinions," she said instead. "The town seems quite fond of you." "The town is polite," he said, and for just a moment, something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost serious. "But I am asking you." Varla did not know what to say to that. She stood there, acutely aware of the fact that she was still wearing her dirt-streaked apron and that her hair was probably a mess. "Why?" she asked finally. Yoren tilted his head, studying her. "Because I want you there. Is that not reason enough?" "No," she said honestly. "It is not." He laughed at that, a genuine, surprised sound. "You are going to make me work for this, are you not?" "I do not know what you are talking about." "I think you do." He shifted his loot case on his shoulder. "Come to the tavern, Varla, please. Just for an hour. If you hate the song, you can tell me it is terrible and leave. I promise I will not be offended." She wanted to say no. She wanted to close the door and go back to her stew and her quiet evening and not let herself be drawn any further into whatever this was. But he was looking at her with those dark eyes, and his grin had softened into something that looked almost vulnerable, and she felt her resolve crumbling. "1 hour," she said. His grin widened. "1 hour. I will hold you to that. You had better be worth the interruption to my dinner." "Oh, I am," he said confidently. "Trust me." Varla did not trust him, but she went inside, changed into a clean tunic, and tried to do something with her hair. When she emerged 10 minutes later, Yoren was still waiting on her doorstep, leaning against the frame and gazing up at the darkening sky. He straightened when he saw her, and she could have sworn his eyes lit up. "You look lovely," he said. "Do not start," she muttered, pulling the door shut behind her. "Start what? Whatever it is you do." "I was simply stating a fact. You state a lot of facts, only the true ones." She did not dignify that with a response, but she felt the corner of her mouth twitch despite herself. They walked to the tavern together, Yoren filling the silence with easy chatter about the festival preparations and the surprising number of people who had asked him to play at private gatherings. Varla listened without commenting, hyper-aware of the way people looked at them as they passed. A few nodded politely. A few stared. She was used to it, but having Yoren beside her made it feel different, more noticeable. The green harvest was crowded when they arrived, filled with the warm buzz of conversation and the smell of roasting meat and ale. Yoren led her to a small table near the back, gesturing for her to sit, and then excused himself to set up on the low stage at the front of the room. Varla watched as he greeted the tavern keeper, joked with a group of men at the bar, and then settled onto a stool with his lute. The crowd quieted as he began to tune the instrument, and she saw more than one young woman lean forward, eyes fixed on him, her stomach twisted. She should not have come. This was a mistake. Then Yoren began to play, and the rest of the room seemed to fade. The melody was slow and sweet, a gentle cascade of notes that wrapped around her like a blanket. She had heard him play before, of course, but always from a distance, through windows or across the square. Up close, it was different. She could see the concentration on his face, the way his fingers moved over the strings with practiced ease, the slight furrow between his brows as he focused on the music. When he began to sing, his voice was low and rich, and the words were about longing, about reaching for something just out of reach, about the particular ache of wanting someone who might not want you back. Varla felt her breath catch. She told herself the song was not about her, that it was just a song, that he probably sang about longing to every audience he ever had. But the way he glanced up at her, just once, just for a heartbeat, made her wonder. When the song ended, the room erupted in applause. Yoren smiled, ducked his head in acknowledgement, and launched into a livelier tune that had people clapping along. Varla stayed through 3 more songs, nursing a mug of ale she did not particularly want, and then slipped out as quietly as she could. The cool night air was a relief after the warmth and noise of the tavern, and she stood outside for a moment, trying to collect herself. She was halfway down the street when she heard footsteps behind her, leaving without saying goodbye. Yoren's voice was slightly breathless, as though he had hurried to catch up. Varla stopped but did not turn around. "You were busy. Not too busy to notice you leaving." He came around to face her, his lute case back on his shoulder. "What did you think of the song?" "Of all of them, but especially the first one." She hesitated, weighing her words. "It was beautiful." But nothing. It was beautiful. You are very talented." Yoren studied her, his expression unreadable in the dim light from the tavern windows. "You did not like it." "I did not say that." "You did not have to." He shifted, looking suddenly uncertain. "I thought never mind, it does not matter." "What does not matter?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Thank you for coming. I know it was an interruption." He started to turn away, and Varla felt a sharp pang of something that might have been panic. "Wait," she said, and he stopped, looking back at her. She fumbled for words, trying to figure out what she wanted to say, why she had stopped him. "The song," she said finally. "The first one." "What was it about?" Yoren was quiet for a long moment. "What do you think it was about?" "I think you are avoiding the question." He laughed softly. "I think you already know the answer, and you are waiting for me to say it out loud." Varla's heart was pounding. "Then say it." "It was about you," Yoren said, and the casual ease in his voice was gone, replaced by something raw and honest. "It has always been about you. Every song I have written since I got to this town has been about you." She stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "That is ridiculous." "Is it?" "Yes. You barely know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know you are kind even when you pretend not to be. I know you make the best remedies in the county because you actually care about whether people get better. I know you have a sharp tongue and a sharper mind, and you do not suffer fools, which is probably why you barely tolerate me. I know you drink your tea strong enough to wake the dead, and you have to duck every time you walk through a door, and you look at the world like you are waiting for it to disappoint you. He took a step closer, his eyes locked on hers. And I know that I have been trying to get your attention for weeks, and I am starting to think I am failing miserably. Varla's mouth was dry. You are not failing. No, no, you are succeeding. It is driving me mad. Yoren blinked, and then a slow smile spread across his face. Mad in a good way or a bad way, I have not decided yet. She took a breath, trying to steady herself. You talk to everyone, Yoren, every woman in this town. How am I supposed to know that I am any different? His smile faded, and he looked at her with an expression so earnest it made her chest ache. Because I am telling you, right now, you are different. You have always been different. Why? The word came out harsher than she intended. Why me? I do not know, he said honestly. I walked into your shop 3 weeks ago, and you looked at me like I was a mild inconvenience, and I thought you were the most interesting person I had ever met. I wanted to make you smile. I wanted to hear you laugh again. I wanted to know what you thought about things, what you liked, what you hated, and the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. I know I flirt. I know I joke around. It is what I do, but with you it is different. With you I mean it. Varla did not know what to say. Every instinct told her to protect herself, to not believe him, to assume this was just another game. But the look in his eyes was so open, so vulnerable that she could not dismiss it. I made a list, she said abruptly. Things orcs hate. Yoren looked confused. A list? Yes, small doors, weak tea, watching you talk to other women. She felt her face heat as she said it, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. That is what I wrote, this morning, like a fool. For a moment, Yoren just stared at her. Then he started to laugh, a bright, delighted sound that made her want to simultaneously hit him and kiss him. It is not funny, she said. It is a little funny, he said, still grinning. Varla, I have been talking to other women to try to make you jealous. She blinked. What? I am not proud of it, he admitted. But you barely looked at me unless I was standing directly in front of you, and I thought if you saw other people interested, maybe you would. I do not know. Notice me, want me, something. He shook his head. It was stupid. I am sorry. Varla did not know whether to be angry or relieved. So you were trying to manipulate me? No, maybe, a little. He winced. I was trying to get your attention. I did not know what else to do. Every time I tried to talk to you, you looked like you wanted me to leave. I thought you were not interested. I am interested, she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. I have been interested since the day you walked into my shop. I just did not think you could possibly. She broke off, frustrated with herself. Yoren stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Could possibly what? Want me, she said quietly. I am an orc, Yoren. You are you. You could have anyone. I do not want anyone, he said. I want you. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly that it frightened her. This is a terrible idea, she said, probably. He smiled. Does that mean you are saying yes? To what? You have not actually asked me anything. Varla Dragosh, he said, his voice suddenly formal despite the grin on his face. Would you allow me the extraordinary honor of courting you? Properly, I mean. With the understanding that I will stop talking to other women, unless it is absolutely necessary for my job or basic politeness, and that I will bring you proper tea on a regular basis, and that I will do my very best not to make you want to throw things at me. Despite everything, Varla felt herself smile. You are ridiculous. That is not an answer. Yes, she said, Fine. Yes. Yoren's grin widened, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her right there in the street. Instead, he reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and rough from the lute strings. "Thank you," he said softly. "You will not regret this." "I already regret it a little," she said, but she squeezed his hand back. They stood there for a moment, hands clasped, neither quite sure what came next. Finally, Yoren cleared his throat. "I should probably get back to the tavern. I am supposed to play for another hour." "You should." She did not let go of his hand. "Will you come back inside, just to listen?" She shook her head. "Not tonight. I need to think." "About whether you are making a horrible mistake." "Something like that." He nodded, looking disappointed but not surprised. "Tomorrow, then." "Tomorrow," she agreed. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a quick kiss to her knuckles, and then released her and headed back toward the tavern. Varla watched him go, her heart still racing, and wondered what on earth she had just agreed to. The next few days passed in a blur. Yoren kept his word about courting her properly, which apparently meant showing up at her shop every morning with a cup of strong tea from old Margit's stall, and some ridiculous excuse about needing her advice. He asked her about herbs and remedies, about the town's history, about her life before Millbrook. She found herself answering more than she intended, drawn in by his genuine curiosity, and the way he listened like every word mattered. In the evenings, after his performances at the tavern, he would walk her home and they would talk about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood in a coastal town, 3 days' ride to the south, about learning the lute from his grandfather, about the restless urge that kept him traveling from place to place. She told him about growing up in a small Orc settlement in the northern hills, about losing her parents to a fever when she was 16, about finding her way to Millbrook and slowly building a life here. He did not kiss her, though she caught him looking at her mouth more than once. She appreciated the restraint, even as part of her wondered what she would do if he tried. The festival continued, growing louder and more crowded as the week progressed. Merchants and travelers poured into Millbrook, filling the tavern and the inns and camping in the fields beyond the town. Yoren was busier than ever, playing multiple sets each night and helping organize the various contests and events. Varla watched him charm the crowds, watched him laugh and joke and make people happy, and tried to quiet the small voice in her head that still worried he would get bored and move on. One afternoon, 4 days after their conversation in the street, a woman arrived at Varla's shop asking for a headache remedy. She was young and pretty, with auburn hair and a traveling cloak that marked her as a merchant's daughter from one of the larger towns. Varla prepared the remedy, accepted payment, and was about to send the woman on her way when the woman lingered, glancing around the shop. "You are Varla, are you not?" the woman asked. "I am." "I have heard Yoren mention you." The woman smiled, and there was something almost pitying in it. "He is quite taken with you." Varla felt her guard go up immediately. "Is he?" "Oh yes, it is sweet, really, he always does this." "Does what?" The woman tilted her head, still smiling. "Falls hard and fast for someone in whatever town he is visiting. It never lasts, of course. He is a wanderer." "But I am sure you know that." Varla kept her expression neutral, though her stomach had dropped. "Thank you for your insight. I am only trying to help," the woman said. "I would hate to see you get hurt. He means well, but he is not the settling type. I will keep that in mind." The woman left, and Varla stood alone in her shop, staring at the jars of herbs on the shelves and feeling like the floor had tilted under her feet. She told herself the woman was lying or mistaken or jealous. She told herself Yoren had been honest with her, that what they had was real. But the doubt had taken root and she could not shake it. That evening, when Yoren came to walk her home, she was distant. He noticed immediately, of course, and asked what was wrong. She told him she was tired, He did not push, but she could see the worry in his eyes as he said good night. The next day, the doubt had only grown. She found herself watching him in the square, saw the easy way he laughed with a group of women who had gathered to watch him rehearse, and felt that familiar hot twist in her chest. She retreated into her shop and tried to focus on her work, but her hands were shaking. By evening, she had convinced herself that the auburn-haired woman was right. Yoren was leaving at the end of the festival, which was only 3 days away now. Of course this was temporary. Of course he would move on. She had been a fool to think otherwise. When he arrived to walk her home that night, she told him she was not feeling well and sent him away. He looked hurt, but he left without arguing. The next day, she did not open her shop. She stayed inside, tending her garden and trying to convince herself that cutting things off now would hurt less than waiting for him to leave. On the second day, there was a knock at her door just after dawn. She considered ignoring it, but the knock came again, insistent. She opened the door to find Yoren standing there, looking tired and worried and a little angry. "What did I do?" he asked without preamble. "Nothing," she said. "That is not true. 2 days ago everything was fine. Now you will not talk to me. What changed?" "Nothing changed. She stopped, unsure how to explain. "I realized this was a mistake." His face went pale. "What, this, us? It was a mistake." "Why, because you are leaving," she said, the words tumbling out. "The festival ends in 2 days and you will move on to the next town and I will still be here." "I should have known better than to," she broke off, feeling her throat tighten. Yoren stared at her. "Who told you I was leaving?" "No one had to tell me. I know how this works. Clearly you do not." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Varla, I am not leaving. I was planning to stay." She blinked. "What?" "I was going to tell you after the festival," he said. "I have already spoken to the tavern keeper about a permanent position. I was going to ask if you thought I could make a living here, playing music and maybe teaching lessons. I was going to." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I was going to ask if you wanted me to stay, but apparently someone convinced you I was going to abandon you." Varla felt like the ground had shifted again. "Someone told me you do this, that you fall for someone in every town and then leave." "Who told you that?" "A woman. Auburn hair. A merchant's daughter, I think." Yoren closed his eyes. "Elissa, you know her." "I know her." He opened his eyes and his expression was grim. "We were involved briefly about a year ago, in another town. It did not end well. She has been following the festival circuit and I have been avoiding her. I did not realize she was here." "So it is true, you do this." "I did this," he corrected. "Once, and it was a mistake. I thought I cared about her and I was wrong. When I realized it, I ended things and she did not take it well. I learned my lesson." He took a step closer. "Varla, I am not that person anymore. I know the difference now between infatuation and—" He stopped, looking like he was struggling for words. "And this, what I feel for you, it is not the same." "How do I know that?" she asked quietly. "How do I know you will not wake up in a month and realize you made another mistake?" "You do not," he said. "I cannot prove it to you. I can only ask you to trust me." He reached out and took her hands, his grip warm and steady. "I am terrified, Varla. I have never felt this way about anyone and it scares the hell out of me. I am not good at staying in one place. I do not know if I will be able to make a living here. I do not know if the town will even accept us together, but I want to try. I want to try because of you." Varla looked at him, at the earnestness in his face, the way his hands trembled slightly around hers. She thought about the list in her pocket, the stupid, honest list that had started all of this. She thought about the way he had brought her tea every morning, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in the world. "I am afraid," she admitted. "So am I," he said. "If you hurt me, I will never forgive you, I know." She took a shaky breath. "Stay then, if you mean it, stay." The relief on his face was so profound that it made her chest ache. "I mean it," he said. "I swear." "All right," she said. "All right." He pulled her into his arms and she let him, pressing her face against his shoulder and breathing in the scent of him, loot wood and soap and something warm and indefinable. They stood like that for a long time, neither speaking, until Varla finally pulled back and looked up at him. "You should probably go deal with Alyssa," she said. "Before she causes more trouble." Yoren grimaced. "I will. I should have done it already. I am sorry she spoke to you. I am sorry I believed her. You had reason to." He hesitated, then leaned down and kissed her forehead, a soft, lingering touch that made her close her eyes. "I will come back tonight, after my performance. We can talk more. I would like that." He smiled, squeezed her hands one more time and left. Varla watched him go, then closed the door and leaned against it, trying to process everything that had just happened. She felt wrung out and uncertain and, underneath it all, cautiously hopeful. That evening she went to the tavern. She told herself it was to support Yoren, but really it was because she needed to see him, needed to reassure herself that this was real. The tavern was packed for the second to last night of the festival, and she had to squeeze into a corner near the back. Yoren was already on stage, playing a lively tune that had the crowd clapping along. When he finished and the applause died down, he set his lute aside and cleared his throat. "Before I play the next song," he said, his voice carrying through the room, "I have an announcement. I will be staying in Millbrook permanently. The Green Harvest has been kind enough to offer me a position, and I have accepted." There was a murmur of surprise and approval from the crowd. Varla felt her heart skip. He had not told her he was going to announce it publicly. "I also want to dedicate this next song to someone," Yoren continued, and his eyes found hers across the room. "To Varla, who has taught me that the best things are worth staying for." The crowd turned to look at her, and she felt her face heat. But Yoren was already playing, and the song was slow and sweet and aching, a melody that seemed to wrap around her and pull her closer. She listened, unable to look away from him, and when the song ended and the crowd erupted in applause, she found herself smiling despite the tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. After the performance, Yoren found her near the back of the tavern. "Was that too much?" he asked, looking suddenly uncertain. "Yes," she said, "but I liked it," he grinned. "Good, because I am not done yet." "What does that mean?" "You will see. Tomorrow night. Closing ceremony. Be there." "Yoren, trust me," he said, and kissed her cheek before disappearing back into the crowd. Varla went home that night with her head spinning. She did not know what he was planning, but she suspected it was going to be dramatic and public and probably embarrassing. She found herself oddly excited about it. The next day passed slowly. The town was buzzing with activity as people prepared for the closing ceremony, a bonfire and feast that would mark the end of the festival. Varla opened her shop for a few hours in the morning, then closed early to help with preparations. She saw Yoren in the square, setting up the stage for the evening's performances, and he waved at her with a grin that made her stomach flutter. As evening fell, the bonfire was lit in the center of the square, and people began gathering with food and drink. Musicians played, children ran laughing through the crowd, and the air filled with the smell of roasting meat and sweet cakes. Varla found a spot near the edge of the square, nursing a mug of mulled cider and watching the festivities. She felt oddly nervous, though she could not have said why. When Yoren took the stage, the crowd quieted. He played 3 songs, each one met with enthusiastic applause, and then he set his lute down and addressed the crowd. "Before I finish tonight," he said, "I want to share something. A few days ago, someone I care about very much made a list. It was called Things Orcs Hate. The first item was small doors, which is fair, because have you seen the size of the doors in this town? There was a ripple of laughter. The second item was weak tea, which is also fair, because honestly, we could all stand to brew ours a bit stronger. More laughter. The third item was watching him talk to other women, and that one, I admit, was my fault. Varla felt her face go hot. The crowd was looking around, trying to figure out who he was talking about. A few people near her were starting to put it together. I am not good at this, Yoren continued. Saying what I mean, being honest about what I want. I hide behind jokes and songs because it is easier than being vulnerable. But someone recently showed me that honesty, even when it is scary, is worth it. So here is my honesty. He picked up a piece of parchment from beside his lute. This is my list. It is called Things I Love. There is only one item. He unfolded the parchment and held it up. Even from a distance, Varla could see the single word written in bold letters. Varla. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Varla stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. Yoren stepped off the stage and walked toward her, the parchment still in his hand. When he reached her, he held it out. I love you, he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I know it is fast, and I know it is terrifying, but it is true. I love your sharp tongue and your sharper mind. I love the way you care for people even when you pretend not to. I love that you drink your tea strong and that you do not suffer fools. I love everything about you, and I wanted everyone here to know it. Varla took the parchment, staring at the single word written there. She looked up at Yoren, at the hope and fear in his eyes, and felt something inside her shift and settle into place. I love you too, she said, and the words felt right, felt true. Yoren's face lit up. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and the crowd around them cheered. Varla kissed him back, tasting cider and joy and the promise of something real, something lasting. When they finally broke apart, Yoren was grinning like a fool. So, he said. How did I do? Ridiculous, she said. Dramatic, completely over the top, but effective. Yes, she admitted, effective, good. He took her hand and laced his fingers through hers. Come on. Let us get some food. I am starving and I want to spend the rest of the night with you. They spent the evening by the bonfire, eating and talking and watching the festivities. People came up to congratulate them, some curious, some supportive, a few clearly skeptical but too polite to say so. Varla did not care. She was too happy to let anyone else's opinion matter. As the night wore on and the crowd began to thin, Yoren walked her home. They took their time, meandering through the quiet streets, hands clasped. When they reached her door, Varla turned to face him. Are you sure about this? She asked. Staying here, staying with me, I am sure, he said. Are you? I am terrified, she admitted. But yes, I am sure, he smiled, soft and genuine. We will figure it out together. Together, she agreed. He kissed her good night, slow and sweet, and then stepped back. I should go. Early morning tomorrow, I need to move my things from the inn. You could stay, she said impulsively, and then felt her face heat. I mean not like that, I have a spare room if you need a place. Until you find something more permanent. Yoren looked surprised and then pleased. Are you sure? Yes, it makes sense. Practical. Practical, he repeated, grinning. Right, stop smirking. I am not smirking, I am smiling. There is a difference. There really is not. He laughed and kissed her again, quick and light. I will move in tomorrow. Thank you, Varla. You are welcome, she said, and watched as he walked away, whistling a cheerful tune. The next few weeks passed in a blur of adjustment. Yoren moved into her spare room, which quickly filled with his lute, his clothes and stacks of parchment covered in half-written songs. He played at the green harvest most evenings and helped Varla in the shop during the day, learning about herbs and remedies with surprising enthusiasm. She taught him which plants to harvest and when, how to dry and store them properly, how to mix tinctures and salves. He was a quick learner, and his presence made the work feel lighter, less lonely. The town, for the most part, accepted their relationship with a kind of bemused tolerance. A few people made snide comments, but they were in the minority. Most seemed more interested in Yoren's music than in his choice of partner. Varla found herself relaxing, letting herself believe that this could actually work. They fell into an easy rhythm, mornings spent working in the shop or the garden, evenings at the tavern or walking through the town. Yoren was affectionate and attentive, constantly finding small ways to make her smile. He brought her tea without being asked, left little notes for her to find, played soft melodies on his lute while she worked. She found herself opening up to him in ways she never had with anyone else, sharing her fears and hopes and the parts of herself she usually kept hidden. One evening, about a month after the festival, they were sitting in her kitchen after dinner, Yoren mending a broken string on his lute while Varla read a book on medicinal plants. He looked up suddenly, setting the lute aside. "I have been thinking," he said. "That sounds dangerous," she said without looking up. "I want to move into your room." She glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. "My room?" "Yes, I mean if you want. I thought we are together. It seems silly to keep sleeping in separate rooms." Varla set her book down. "Are you asking to share my bed?" "Yes, if you are comfortable with that." She studied him, noting the slight flush on his cheeks, the way he was fidgeting with the broken string. "I am comfortable with that," she said, "but only if you stop leaving your socks everywhere." "I found 3 pairs in the kitchen yesterday." Yoren grinned. "I make no promises about the socks. Then you can stay in the spare room." "I will try," he amended. "I will make an honest effort to contain the socks. Good enough." That night, Yoren moved his things into her room and they lay together in the dark, tangled up in each other, talking in quiet voices until they fell asleep. Varla felt a sense of peace she had never known, a certainty that this was where she belonged. Winter came, bringing cold winds and snow that blanketed the town. Yoren played at the tavern less frequently, as fewer people ventured out in the harsh weather and spent more time helping Varla in the shop. They weathered the season together, huddled by the fire in the evenings, reading and talking and simply being together. As spring approached and the snow began to melt, Yoren grew restless. Varla noticed him staring out the window more often, saw the way his fingers drummed against his leg when he was idle. She worried that he was getting bored, that the urge to travel was pulling at him again. One evening, she asked him about it directly. "Are you unhappy?" she said. He looked startled. "No, why would you think that? You seem restless," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I am not unhappy, I am just thinking." "About what?" "About the future." He turned to face her fully. "Varla, I want to marry you," she blinked. "What?" "I want to marry you," he repeated. "I know it has only been a few months and maybe it is too soon, but I am sure. I want to build a life with you. I want to make this permanent." Varla felt her heart racing. "Yoren, you do not have to answer now," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. I have been thinking about it for weeks, and I did not want to keep it to myself anymore." She looked at him, at the earnest hope in his face, and felt something warm and solid settle in her chest. "Ask me properly," she said. He smiled, a slow, delighted smile, and dropped to one knee in front of her. "Varla Dragosh, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she said, and pulled him up to kiss him. "Yes, you ridiculous man, yes." They were married in early spring, in a simple ceremony in the town square. The blacksmith's wife baked a cake, the tavern keeper provided ale, and Yoren played a song he had written just for the occasion. Varla wore a dress she had sewn herself, green to match her skin, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers. She felt beautiful and nervous and happier than she had ever been. The town turned out for the wedding, more out of curiosity than anything else, but their presence felt like a kind of acceptance. When the ceremony was over and Yoren kissed her in front of everyone, Varla heard cheers mixed with the applause, and she let herself believe that they had found their place here. That night, lying in bed with Yoren's arms around her, Varla thought about the list she had made all those months ago. Small doors, weak tea, watching him talk to other women. She still hated the first two, but the third no longer bothered her. She had learned to trust him, to trust what they had built together. And in return, he had given her a life she had never imagined she could have. "What are you thinking about?" Yoren murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "My list," she said. "The infamous list. Yes, I am thinking I should add to it. More things orcs hate. No, more things orcs love." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with interest. Such as terrible musicians who bring strong tea and refuse to leave you alone until you fall in love with them. He laughed, the sound filling the room. "Terrible, I am wounded. You will survive. Only because I have you to tend my wounds." "Exactly." She pulled him down for a kiss, and he went willingly, his hands sliding into her hair. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. Yoren built a reputation as a musician and teacher, and Varla's apothecary thrived. They became a fixture in Millbrook, the orc woman and the human musician, the couple who proved that love could bridge any divide. When Varla discovered she was pregnant 2 years after their wedding, Yoren was so excited he nearly dropped his lute. He fussed over her constantly, bringing her special teas and cushions and insisting she rest more than she wanted to. She tolerated it with good-natured exasperation, knowing it came from a place of love. Their son was born in the middle of summer, a healthy baby with his father's dark eyes and his mother's green skin. They named him Paxson, and Yoren wrote a song for him before he was even an hour old. Varla held her baby and watched her husband play, and thought that she had never imagined she could feel this full, this complete. 2 years later, a second son arrived, whom they named Landric. He had Yoren's nose and Varla's pointed ears, and he cried lustily from the moment he entered the world. Yoren joked that he was destined to be a singer, and Varla did not have the heart to tell him that orc babies were simply louder than human ones. Their house, which had once felt too large and empty, now felt exactly right. The spare room became a nursery, filled with the sounds of laughter and crying, and the lullabies Yoren played on his lute. Varla balanced motherhood with her work, teaching the boys about herbs and plants as soon as they were old enough to understand. Yoren taught them music, showing them how to pluck simple tunes on a small lute he built just for them. Life was busy and chaotic and full, and Varla would not have changed a single thing. One evening, when the boys were in bed and the house was finally quiet, Varla pulled out the old list she had made so many years ago. It was creased and faded now, the ink smudged in places from being folded and unfolded so many times. She looked at the 3 items, smiled, and picked up a quill. On the back of the parchment she wrote, "Things orcs love" underneath. She added a single line, "Strong tea, open doors, and a man who stayed." She folded the list carefully and tucked it into the pocket of her apron, where it had lived for so long. Then she went to find Yoren, who was sitting by the fire with his lute, humming softly to himself. "What are you working on?" she asked, settling beside him. "A new song," he said. "About home. Let me hear it." He played, and the melody was warm and gentle, full of the kind of contentment that only comes from knowing exactly where you belong. When he finished, Varla took his hand and laced her fingers through his. "It is perfect," she said. "So are you," he replied, and kissed her. Outside, The stars were bright above Millbrook, and inside the fire crackled softly in the hearth. Varla leaned against Yoren, listening to his heartbeat, and thought about all the things she had hated and all the things she had learned to love. Small doors were still annoying, and weak tea was still an abomination, but watching Yoren talk to other women no longer bothered her in the slightest. He was hers and she was his, and that was all that mattered. Years passed, and their boys grew strong and healthy. Paxson showed an aptitude for music, spending hours with his father learning complicated fingerings and chord progressions. Landrick, meanwhile, gravitated toward his mother's work, fascinated by the properties of different plants and the alchemy of mixing remedies. Varla taught him with patience, pleased to have someone to pass her knowledge to. The town changed around them, growing slightly larger as more families moved in and the old prejudices slowly faded. There were other mixed couples now, human and orc, and the children who grew up seeing Varla and Yoren together thought nothing strange about it. Progress was slow, but it was real. On their 10th anniversary, Yoren surprised Varla with a new door for their home. It was taller than the old one, tall enough that she did not have to duck even a little. She laughed when she saw it, touched by the gesture, and kissed him thoroughly in the doorway while their boys groaned and made exaggerated gagging noises. "One thing off your list," Yoren said, grinning. "I suppose I will have to make a new list now," she replied. "Do not you dare. I have spent years making up for the last one." "You have," she agreed. "You have done very well." That evening they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over Millbrook. The boys were inside, supposedly doing their chores but probably getting into some kind of mischief. Varla did not mind. This was what she had always wanted, even when she had not known to want it. A home, a family, a partner who loved her fiercely and without reservation. "Do you ever regret staying?" she asked Yoren, the question surprising even herself. He looked at her, his expression soft. "Not once, not for a single moment. Even when you see other musicians passing through. Even when you hear about the cities and the festivals and all the places you could have gone. Even then." He took her hand. "I found everything I was looking for right here. Why would I leave?" Varla smiled, squeezing his hand. "No reason, I just wanted to hear you say it." "I will say it as many times as you need to hear it." He leaned over and kissed her temple. "I love you, Varla. I love this life we built. I love our boys. I love that I get to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I love that you still make that face when you taste weak tea and that you still write things down when you are frustrated. I love all of it." "I love you too," she said quietly. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for letting me." They sat together as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, the sounds of their son's laughter drifting through the open windows. Varla thought about the girl she had been, the one who had made that list in a moment of frustration and honesty, and wished she could tell her that everything would work out better than she ever imagined. But that girl was gone now, replaced by this woman, this wife and mother who had learned that sometimes the best things come when you least expect them. And sometimes, the person who drives you the most mad is the person you cannot live without. As they finally rose to go inside, Yoren paused and looked back at her. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I think I should make my own list, things musicians hate." "Oh really, like what?" "Broken strings, tone-deaf audiences, and spending even one day without you." Varla rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. "You are incorrigible. You love it." "I do," she admitted. "Damn you, I really do." They went inside together to their home and their children and the life they had built one day at a time. And if Varla still kept that old list tucked away in a drawer, folded carefully and preserved like the treasure it was, well, that was her business. It was a reminder of where they had started, and how far they had come, and the ridiculous, wonderful way that love could change everything. In the end, the list had only 3 items under things orcs hate, and 1 item under things orcs love. But that single item was worth more than all the rest combined, and Varla Nell, formerly Dragosh, would not have traded it for anything in the world.